I was recently at a friend's house and their kid, who's autistic, like completely flipped out when he saw this bowl of star-shaped fruit snacks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it totally caught me off guard. Turns out it wasn't the snack itself, but the shape.
Interesting.
So we're diving into your request to learn more about autism and specifically the fear of shapes. Morphophobia.
Okay, yeah. Morphophobia.
It's fascinating.
It is. What's really interesting is that, while most people might find certain shapes, I don't know, like aesthetically displeasing or something,
Right.
for individuals with morphophobia, it's a whole other level of experience.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What exactly are we talking about when we say fear of shapes?
So morphophobia is a real phobia, just like a fear of spiders or heights.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it's specific shapes that trigger intense fear, anxiety, even panic.
Wow.
And it's important to remember, this isn't just about someone disliking a pattern on a curtain or something.
Right.
It can significantly impact their daily life.
So it's a genuine fear response, not just a matter of preference.
Exactly.
The article you shared, Autism and the Fear of Shapes, a Sensory Exploration, dives into some possible explanations for why shapes might feel so scary. Sensory overload was the first one that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, so imagine trying to have a conversation with a friend in a crowded, noisy cafe.
Okay.
But it's like 10 other conversations are happening around you at the same time, all competing for your attention. That
Yes.
overwhelming feeling.
Yeah.
That sensory overload, but instead of sounds, it's visual input for someone with morphophobia.
Wow, that puts it into perspective. So it's not just about disliking a shape, it's about how that shape, especially repeated patterns, can create this intense, overwhelming sensory experience.
Exactly. Now, layer on top of that the way some individuals with autism process visual information.
Right, because that's another key piece of the puzzle, isn't it? This idea that visual processing differences might be at play. What's fascinating to me is how our brains can interpret the same input in such radically different ways.
Absolutely. Some autistic people might perceive shapes in fragments
Hmm.
rather than seeing the whole.
Okay.
Imagine looking at a star, but instead of a five-pointed shape, your brain sees five separate lines that don't quite connect in a way that makes sense.
Right.
It can be incredibly disorienting.
Like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces don't quite fit together.
Yeah, yeah.
No wonder it can be so anxiety-inducing.
And then you add in the potential impact of past experiences, which can be incredibly powerful. The article talked about associative learning.
Right, so it's like if you had a bad fall on a checkerboard floor as a child, you might associate those squares with that negative experience.
Precisely. Except for someone with morphophobia, that association might be magnified significantly,
Hmm.
making it even harder to separate the shape from the feeling of fear or anxiety.
So we've got these three potential factors at play: sensory overload, visual processing differences, and the impact of past experiences. All these things intertwining to create this very real phobia. It makes you wonder how many other, like, seemingly ordinary things might be experienced so differently by others. We've talked about the what and the why of this fear, but what about the how? How can people actually navigate a world full of shapes when those shapes themselves can be, like, so triggering?
That's where things get really hopeful, actually. There are some really effective strategies for managing morphophobia. The article highlighted several, like creating sensory-friendly environments.
So what does that look like in practical terms? Because it's not like we can just eliminate shapes from our lives.
True. It's more about minimizing potential triggers. Think calming colors on the walls instead of like bright, contrasting patterns. Imagine rooms that are less cluttered, with furniture arranged in a way that feels, open and easy to navigate. Even something as simple as using solid-colored plates and cups instead of patterned ones can make a huge difference.
It's about creating a sense of calm and predictability in the environment, reducing that feeling of sensory overload.
Exactly. And it goes beyond the physical environment, too. There are therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT that can be incredibly helpful.
I've heard of CBT, but to be honest, I don't really understand how it works. How do you go about, like, rewiring someone's brain to respond differently to shapes?
Think of it like this. Imagine teaching a dog a new trick. You don't just tell the dog to do it and expect them to understand right.
Right.
It takes repetition, positive reinforcement, and gradually building up to the desired behavior. CBT is similar.
So walk me through how this might apply to someone with a fear of, say, circles.
Okay, so a therapist might start by showing the person pictures of circles, but they'd start small and gradually work their way up. Maybe they begin with a simple, faint outline of a circle, then gradually introduce more defined circles, different colors, and eventually real-life objects that are circular.
So it's like slowly exposing them to the source of their fear in a controlled environment, but at the same time teaching them techniques to manage the anxiety that comes up.
Exactly. It's not just exposure therapy. It's about giving them the tools to reframe their thoughts and reactions. Maybe they learn deep breathing exercises to use when they feel anxious, or they practice replacing negative thoughts like circles are scary with more positive ones like circles are just shapes and they can't hurt me.
That makes sense. It's about changing that internal dialogue, that knee-jerk reaction. The article also mentioned occupational therapy, or OT, as another helpful approach. How does that fit into the picture?
Occupational therapists are amazing at finding practical, personalized strategies to help people with sensory processing differences thrive in their daily lives.
So it's less about addressing the fear of shapes directly and more about equipping individuals with the tools to navigate a world that's full of, sensory input.
Precisely.
Mm.
An OT might work with someone to identify their specific sensory triggers and develop coping mechanisms. They might introduce sensory regulation tools like weighted blankets, noise-canceling headphones, or even just, specific fidget toys that can help ground them when they're feeling overwhelmed.
It's about empowering them to manage their own sensory experiences, finding what works best for them. Because, like we were saying earlier, everyone's sensory fingerprint is unique. What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And we can't forget the power of community. Support groups, both online and in person, can be incredibly validating and empowering for people with morphophobia, or any sensory processing difference for that matter.
It's that sense of, I'm not alone in this, that shared understanding that can make a world of difference. Knowing that other people get it, that they've been there, can be incredibly reassuring. It's like, finding your people, those who just get it.
Exactly. That shared experience can be incredibly validating and provide a sense of belonging, which can be so important for anyone who's, ever felt different.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes, I have to say. It's amazing how much we can learn when we take the time to kind of, understand experiences that might be different from our own.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? This whole, deep dive into morphophobia, it ultimately points to a much broader need for empathy and understanding in how we design our world, how we interact with each other.
Absolutely. Because even if we don't personally experience, a fear of shapes, this exploration helps us be more mindful, more aware of the diverse ways people experience the world around us.
It's about recognizing that what seems normal to one person might feel completely different to another. And that's okay. In fact, it's what makes humanity so beautifully diverse.
This entire conversation reminds me of that quote, the true voyage of discovery lies not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. It's about challenging our assumptions, questioning what we think we know, and being open to new perspectives.
Beautifully put. It's about recognizing that everyone's reality is shaped by their own unique set of experiences and perceptions, and that by embracing those differences, we create a richer, more compassionate world for everyone.
So to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a new lens through which to see the world around you. A world where even shapes can hold, hidden depths and unexpected stories. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep embracing the, wonderfully diverse tapestry of human experience.